Kid Rock is a unique and strange bird. He has reinvented himself multiple different times, going from hip-hop to rock to country music and so on and so forth. And he's an immensely successful musician. Regardless of what you think of him personally, Kid Rock is crazy successful, selling tens of millions of albums around the world. And to this day, he has not fallen off. He has cruises, restaurants, you name it. Kid Rock has done it. But along the way, there's been tons and tons of crazy shit. From before he was famous and during his career, Kid Rock has truly had a very crazy history that we're gonna dive into today.
A lot of bands have trim coordinators.
Trim coordinators?
The guy with the stack of passes goes out and recruits in the crowd. It's kind of like joining the army or something.
Kid Rock, as you know, is also known as Bob Ritchie. That's his given name. He was born as Robert James Ritchie back in 1971. And given that he's from Detroit, Michigan, there are a lot of people that have this perception that Kid Rock was from the streets and he was this very underprivileged individual. He struggled hard, but that couldn't be further from the truth. His pops was a very successful car salesman who owned multiple car dealerships, and Kid Rock grew up working on an orchard that his father owned. Around the 80s was when Kid Rock discovered hip hop, and he got particularly interested in breakdancing, and he actually joined a breakdance crew. And it would be very interesting to see if Kid Rock was still somehow able to bust out those moves these days. During this time of interest, he also taught himself how to rap and DJ. He went around to different parties and performed and also DJ'd for the crowd. Unbelievably, Kid Rock was very good at networking with people in the area. He ended up meeting a rapper by the name of D-Nice, who was closely associated with KRS-One, a legendary hip-hop artist.
Never fake, shake straight from the Great Lakes. 7 years on wax from the correct flat. This new bitch is when I pull the straps out and get the buck.
From there, he played some shows with him in the local area, and D-Nice evidently liked Kid Rock so much that he got him a spot on the record label that he was on, Jive Records, which is a major deal. And from there, you very much could have had Kid Rock being the next Vanilla Ice, or maybe even Vanilla Ice before Vanilla Ice, but that, as we now know, was not how things panned out. Kid Rock was able to make lightning strike twice, but back then when he was rapping, his music was incredibly vulgar, much more vulgar than even anything at the time. If you go back and listen to those early Kid Rock raps, they're good, but they're also really crazy. And then under that new deal with Jive Records, he released his album Grits Sandwiches for Breakfast, which was his debut effort in 1990. And it makes you wonder whether or not Jive was interested in him because of what was happening around the same time with Vanilla Ice.
You gotta be very careful with the girls. You gotta be, like, you literally have to check IDs. They're like, I'm 18. I'm like, oh, I know you are, baby. Believe me, you're 35 in my mind. I just gotta see your ID, you know?
Kid Rock has always been controversial, no doubt about that. And with this debut record came controversy for his label. He got in trouble because his song Yodelin' in the Valley, his single at the time, had a lot of references that just couldn't be played on radio. As I mentioned, it was extremely profanity laced, and when it was played on the radio, it issued an FCC fine to that radio station that played the song uncensored. And apparently back then that was a very big deal and a big controversy, so much so that in relation to that, Jive Records dropped Kid Rock from their label. Of course, we don't know if that was exactly the reason, but the timetables there lined up. Now, a few years later, Jive Records was obviously going to come to very much regret that decision, because Kid Rock became one of the most profitable recording artists of the late 90s and early 2000s, absolutely crushing it. There's something about him and his give no shits attitude that really connects with people. Despite having that deal with Jive Records, Kid Rock at that time was still very much underground, and he released 2 albums after that, The Polyfuse Method and Early Morning Stone Pimp, over the next few years. Both albums had crazy lyrics once again, so he just wasn't getting any radio play. He had no chance, no shot of getting those songs on the radio, even if they were censored, because probably every other word would have to be bleeped out. But there was something about that connected with fans, and he toured relentlessly. He was shameless about touring and did a very good job promoting himself, and so that gave him somewhat of a cult following that kept building and building for years to come.
I try to be very down to earth with everybody. On stage, I try to be the biggest superstar there ever was, and off the stage, I try to just be cool, hang out, say hi to people, and it's a tough balance sometimes, but you got to make the effort.
There was also something about Kid Rock that was inherently unique. There weren't a lot of hip-hop artists, or as a matter of fact, anybody at that time who was this white rapper, but also heavily incorporated elements of country music and hard rock into their music. It was just something that really people hadn't seen before. At this point, it was well established that he was a different artist than Vanilla Ice. He wasn't going to be put into that same box. Now, after years of struggling, things were about to take off for Kid Rock in a very big way. And the loss of Jive Records, where they were probably kicking themselves, became the gain of Atlantic Records, who signed him to a deal right before he dropped one of the most selling albums in the history of rock music, or music in general, and that was his 1998 record, Devil Without a Cause. Imagine signing an artist, whatever A&R this was, and then he comes out and moves 14 million units. No musician will ever do that again. Nobody's selling 14 million albums. They're not selling 14 million bottles of water. So Kid Rock ended up appearing on the 1999 VMAs, and this was when MTV was still incredibly relevant. He performed with Run DMC, which is also another huge cosign for him.
My name is Kid.
And that really put him on the map. That, alongside his iconic Woodstock 99 performance, which established him as a very serious live act. And then, oddly enough, Kid Rock was nominated for a Grammy, a fact that you probably didn't know, and he was nominated for Best New Artist, despite having been in the game then for over 10 years. But essentially, people ignored his hip-hop history, and they claimed him as a Best New Artist because this was his take on heavy metal. Again, at this point, Kid Rock was everywhere. It's hard to imagine he was sleeping a lot during this time. He was touring with Metallica. He was all over MTV. He was doing interviews everywhere. He even made that iconic appearance, which I think was awesome, in the movie Joe Dirt.
You crying, boy? Maybe we'll go back down to McDonald's and get you a Whamburger, some French fries. How about a Weineken? You little sissy boy!
Kid Rock toured in support of this album naturally because of the success that it was for the next few years. He also released like a greatest hits album very early on in his career, at least from a mainstream perspective. So Kid Rock released his next album, Cocky, in 2002, which had the mega hit Picture, which still holds up today. It featured Sheryl Crow. They had dueling lyrics, and it was like a relationship style ballad. And in the height of it all, his longtime DJ, Uncle Kracker, left and was like, man, I'm getting out of here. Things are so big, I can go solo. And he had a little bit of success on his own, but he probably would have been better off sticking with Kid Rock. Now, if you can believe this, Kid Rock was actually the subject of much controversy related to the American flag. Before he was criticizing people like Colin Kaepernick, he was being criticized for disrespecting the flag because he wore a poncho, or he basically used the American flag as a poncho, and they said that he was desecrating the flag. Much of this fell by the wayside though, because that was the same Super Bowl halftime show with Janet Jackson and Justin Timberlake. Now, during this album cycle, while he was recording music with Sheryl Crow, the two weren't romantically involved. He actually began dating Pamela Anderson around this time. They would later become married for a brief time, but their relationship would last years and be the cause of much strife in Kid Rock's personal life, and even becoming involved in some feuds and legal situations as a connection to the relationship. In 2003, shortly after releasing that Cocky album, Kid Rock released his self-titled record, again pushing him further in the country direction. Now, Kid Rock ended up getting engaged to Pamela Anderson in April of 2002, but they broke up in 2003. And this is where things started to get weird. Kid Rock had this like sort of fun party vibe to him, and then there was just like string of crazy situation after crazy situation involving a Waffle House and Tommy Lee from Motley Crue and breaking up with Pamela Anderson. He was allegedly charged with assaulting a DJ in an adult club. And as mentioned, just 2 years after that, he got into a scuffle with someone in Waffle House, which then led to a prolonged lawsuit. Here's some footage from that brawl back in the fall of 2007. For his part, Kid Rock was fined $1,000, sentenced to a year probation, and also it was reported that he had to attend some counseling. Apparently he got into an exchange of words with a customer in the parking lot, which then later led to that brawl. The other participant involved in that brawl later filed a case against him in court, and while that case was going on, he got into a massive brawl at the VMAs with Motley Crue drummer Tommy Lee, and they apparently had been feuding privately for the last few years over their relationship with Pamela Anderson. Notably, Tommy Lee has kids with Pamela Anderson, and Kid Rock had been in a long relationship with her at that time. There was a report that Tommy Lee picked up the phone at a family gathering and called Kid Rock and began threatening him or cussing him out on the phone, and then that was what led to the brawl when Kid Rock saw him at the VMAs. A report from MTV at the time back in 2007 said, former Pamela Anderson flames Kid Rock and Tommy Lee traded words in a heated exchange during Alicia Keys' performance at the VMAs. According to eyewitnesses, Lee, sitting at the same table as Diddy, jawed at Kid Rock as he made his way toward the Bad Boy CEO, with whom he was supposed to present the show's final performance. It wasn't clear exactly what Lee said to Rock, but apparently after his words, Rock slapped the drummer, according to eyewitnesses. Lee, one eyewitness said, attempted to fight back before he was able to land a blow, was punched in the face by Rock. Many inside the venue, including Jermaine Dupri, were oblivious to the fight taking place behind them. Others either tried to get out of the way as security tossed chairs to reach the outbreak, or were stunned and didn't quite know what was going on. Security quickly detained both men. Lee was immediately removed from the venue. Rock, with his cigar still in his mouth, was held back momentarily until Lee left and calmly walked out alongside security. He said, "I never hit anybody for nothing before," Rock was overhead saying in the lobby of the casino. "I told him to shut the F up." Tommy Lee and Pamela Anderson were married back in 1995, and at this point when the brawl occurred, Kid Rock had recently divorced Pamela Anderson. Now, reports from that same MTV article, they said less than 2 months after Anderson had filed for divorce from Kid Rock, he was in Vegas. On New Year's Eve, Kid Rock had reportedly learned that his ex had wandered back into Lee's arms. An upset Rock allegedly tried to track Lee down and, with the help of his bodyguards, kicked down what he believed to be the drummer's room at the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino. Instead, he happened upon a startled family. Rock reportedly signed autographs for them so they wouldn't press charges, and retreated to a nearby strip club. So fortunately on that occasion there wasn't anything that had went down, but who knows what the hell would have happened had he found Tommy Lee then. 2011 was also a year where Kid Rock stumbled on a bit of controversy where he was honored by the NAACP. It was then where he faced a lot of criticism for his past usage of the Confederate flag at his performances, and then as a result of that criticism they later distanced themselves and stopped using Confederate flags at any performances, although he had actually stopped doing that years ago back in 2006. He said at the time in a quote, "I never flew the flag with hate in my heart. I love America, I love Detroit, and I love black people." Now this was sort of the kickoff to a feud Kid Rock has had that's been going on for years with a group by the name of the National Action Network. Their leader is Reverend Al Sharpton, and Kid Rock has basically insinuated that they are going to take over the city now, and he's essentially washing his hands of Detroit. You'll recall that recent story where Kid Rock himself had gotten on stage and talked about how he didn't like Oprah and he appeared to be intoxicated. And he made a statement after that where he didn't walk back his criticism of Oprah, but he made it appear as though he's really not going to be having anything to do with Detroit anymore. I'm sure he'll still celebrate living there, but he did not renew his contract to license his name to that restaurant in the Detroit area. And he has been living in Tennessee for the last few years. In 2015, after the tragic Charleston, South Carolina shooting, the National Action Network protested outside of the Detroit Historical Museum, which was honoring Kid Rock, and they again urged him to renounce his past use of the Confederate flag. Again, something he had already done previously on multiple occasions. In response to a request from Fox News, Kid Rock responded to them in email saying, "Please tell the people who are protesting me to kiss my ass." Since that time, Kid Rock has remained active in the music industry, and he is still as successful as he's ever been. And although he has had times where he's appeared intoxicated and let his thoughts ring out about Oprah and things like that, Kid Rock still has a massive fan base. He is still selling records, selling out tours, selling out shows, playing arenas, and there doesn't appear to be any sign of that slowing down for him because viewers like you out there are very supportive of Kid Rock and his music. So the story of Kid Rock goes on, and it's going to go on for quite some time. He's not that old. He is still very much able to put on a great show, and I would imagine there's a lot more to come, at least for country music fans, in the world of Kid Rock. We're going to have to wait and see if there's any chance that he puts out another new metal or hard rock album in the near future. But that is your deep dive on Kid Rock. If you'd like to see more videos like this, you can check us out and subscribe to Rock Feed with notifications on so you don't miss out on breaking news and updates and more videos just like this. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you all very soon.